Hello there. Morning, morning. Quick question before we start the proper Monday meeting. Um, Parsing or converting between BibTeX and JSON shouldn't be much of an effort if we decide to do it, right?
I'm not really sure. Haven't worked with BibTeX much, but I assume it would be fine. Let me take a look at what BibTeX structure is.
Yeah, the thing is, I had to do one of those ACM papers this weekend, and it's absolutely insane how. Oh, did my video just disappear? Let's try this. Yeah, that's better. And I had to basically code. Thankfully, Mark helped me. Oh, here he is. Hi, Mark. I'm just briefly, before we properly start, talking to Andrew briefly about JSON and BibTeX LaTeX because of the experience of you yet again helping me code a paper. So specifically, Andrew, for the BibTeX section, not necessarily for the LaTeX. For the BibTeX, it's quite. Hang on, I'll just put in a link. Hello, Fabian. Are you?
BibTeX actually quite complicated because, like CSV, it's a not format pretending to be a format, or like Markdown, it's a general thing, but there is no canonical agreed source. So, for instance, there are two different hi. There are two different ways you can mark up author information. Both are valid, and there are two subgroups of people who both choose to not use the other one. And so depending on which publisher you download from, half your author information won't work correctly, and you'll have to manually sort of redo it. So um, I hesitate to call BibTeX a standard. Be warned.
Oh, hi, Dini. Hi, Rob. Yeah, I was just asking Andrew a real quick question because I submitted my human paper this weekend only through the sheer willpower and sweat of Mark Anderson. There's two aspects to the paper, of course. One is the LaTeX, which I personally find a bit absurd because you can't do things like a quote mark or ampersand. You have to put in code for what the characters are. So if you choose to write it in a separate piece of software, that's a huge pain. Separately, of course, is the BibTeX that has to go in the references.bib. That seems very close to what we have for our Sloan, and that's what I was asking Jason, Jason, there you go, Andrew about regarding the JSON. So don't worry, it's not a topic for today or anything. It's just a point of interest.
You're back.
Uh, yeah. How is everyone? You look very dark, Rob. Oh, you had your presentation or not? Uh,
Sorry.
did you have your presentation, Rob, since you have your black background?
Oh, I recorded it, and I think we're going to show it at the meeting, so I don't have to fly to Finland. And I don't know, this was on the other day, and I forgot. I can turn it off.
No, that's cool. It's fun. No problems with that. Hang on. Just going to share screen really briefly. So here, you can see this, right? On the ACM page, here is the BibTeX for this paper. So of course Mark is right, and they do all kinds of weird things with the names and several things.
Well, no. I think you're being a little pejorative. It's a thing that's been around for a while. The fact that it's not what you expect it to do doesn't mean it's doing crazy things. I think we need to keep this in perspective. It's unexpected. But for instance, it's like LaTeX has been around for a goodly while. So the fact that it has quibbles, it's like you can't type a left-hand angle bracket in HTML file. You actually have to type it encoded. So these things have been around a long time. I think we need to be fair. Just because they may be different from the perspective of writing in WYSIWYG. That's true, but I think we need to be careful how we characterize these things.
I disagree with you, Mark. Since you were calling me pejorative, I think that there's no such thing as writing in WYSIWYG. We can write in near WYSIWYG because the publishing format will be encoded in a different way anyway. So that whole thing is an issue. But to go back to DOS days, nobody codes in HTML unless you have to go in and tweak something. Nobody does that anymore.
Lots of people do.
I code in HTML. What are you talking about? Everything
Oh,
we do in the lab is
absolutely. I
HTML.
write in HTML.
Danny, when is the last time you actually made an entire page in HTML?
This week,
What was that for?
the lab, everything the lab produces, everything we do is in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Nothing is done in proprietary software, nor do we work in any other method. Everything is open web environment, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. That is the library standard for the most part.
So you hand code and write.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Oh,
lot
teach
cleaner
them.
if you do it by hand than if you use other software.
Yeah, I don't use like a cheater system.
Like a
I went in,
what?
in fact, this weekend I had to go in and update last Friday. I spent Friday updating the lab's website, which is all hand coded, and added lots of data to it. So
Interesting.
no, I mean, I don't use anything that's like WYSIWYG, and then I look at the code like Dreamweaver. We don't even let students talk about Dreamweaver in our classes. They learn to code, they learn to read code. That's the point.
So if you publish an article online, you also write it by hand in HTML. You don't use WordPress or any kind of a template system.
Well, it depends on the article. I mean, if I'm putting something, I mean, there's different methodologies, right? I mean, I'm working on something right now for the Electronic Literature Organization that's on Google Doc, for example. That's not coded. But anything that I put on the web as a web-based document is all open source. And in fact, the project we're doing for the Woodland Library is all open source coding for the archival site that we're building for them. And this is a standard in the US. I don't know what it's like in other countries. But as a person who does archival purposes, no WYSIWYG programs, no iWeb, no Wix, no Squarespace, no Dreamweaver, nothing. And our students are learning to use AI to call up coding, but they still have to know how to go in and clean up the code because the code comes in dirty.
So for the paper that we submitted to ACM, that we wrote together, what you wrote for that, Dina, did you write that in Overleaf? Or
Yeah.
where did you write that?
It was an overleaf. We had to do it in overleaf because that's how Klaus wants to collaborate. That's how Marius collaborates.
So every time you wanted to do an ampersand or a quote mark, you had to write the slash and all of that. Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy. I mean it's crazy, but it's a really good system for collaborating. That when you work in Google Docs, you can't take the document and easily put it into a system for hypertext, right? So the nice thing about the overleaf is that it's pretty much what ACM wants in the end. And that Markdown language, we're also using Markdown for Twine. So we're teaching our students how to use Twine to tell stories. And so there's a lot of GUI with that, but at the same time, they've got to go into the backbone and read the code to understand how to control the system. It's about control. It's about having control over your system.
It's about a kind of control.
It's control over accessibility in the future. When I was doing the Pathfinders project for that NEH grant that I got some time ago, Stuart Moulthrop and I worked really hard before we started the project to figure out what were some of the best long-term methods for maintaining electronic literature over time. And we worked with librarians, the Library of Congress people, because I'd met them when I did the exhibition there. And everything we did in our research back in 2013, 14, and 15 pointed to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and video. Everything else, no Flash, nothing, right? No WYSIWYG, nothing, all straight code. So if you go and look at our project, it's all video and HTML. So I don't know what to say, but yeah, I mean, we teach coding. Our students learn to code. The ones that are going into design go, they say, oh, we don't need to do this. But in the end, if they want to put their picture online, their painting or whatever it is they're putting online, their 3D model, it looks like crap unless they learn how to handle the system. So they learn how to manage and control what they produced. So Andrew wrote in there, yes, that always bothers students at first, but it's worth the effort to learn the process. Knowing how to code in HTML gives the developer much more freedom to create and customize in the end. Plus, the code is much more readable and can be passed on. The other thing is that we write in semantic markup with ARIA, so that people that need assistive technologies can have their web pages read to them through the machine. And that's the other big part of what we're doing in the lab. We never do anything that's not semantic markup.
Yeah, I mean, I completely understand that from from a point of code, absolutely. But in terms of writing an article, to have all the visible formatting, all that doesn't really chime with the kind of person I am, but it seems there is a majority of people here who are happy. Yeah. To me, it's kind of
Can I
important.
suggest the main thing is there isn't a one right way. I think that's what I was trying to hint at earlier. So, so the people in this room are not necessarily a complete cross example, but what I found is that what I've observed is that WYSIWYG type tools are very convenient, and if you want to write a quick letter to the council or something, and it's the kind of thing you often
I
learn,
think
partly because it's taught
pejorative,
in schools. But what I observe is people spend more time doing stuff and writing, unless they're sort of journo type writing. They tend to step away from these tools because you're just fighting through lots of toolbars and this, that, and the other. You know what you want to write, you write it in simple form. And often, anyway, the styling may be done later. So if you're writing in for a newspaper or something, it's probably going to be copy edited. So I'm sort of seeing this, so I'm trying to make sense of the journal, the proceedings I'm trying to wrangle at the moment, is that just every time I think there is basically as it were, a correct way, it turns out there isn't. And there are several choices and none of them is preeminent.
But you use the phrase or the term pejorative when I was talking, but I do feel you're being very pejorative.
No, I didn't say you were pejorative. I said we shouldn't be pejorative. That's what I meant to say anyway.
I mean, when you
what
say
I'm implying is we shouldn't. But if we say this is the way something happens, we're implying that the other things are not right. And I think, as sort of Dini has shown, in fact, an assumption, for instance, that a rendered writing in a rendered form, which is what the WYSIWYG is normal. But if you open up, a docx, it's just XML inside. It's just XML andplists.
Yeah, but Mark, you are being quite pejorative when you're talking about things like just write a letter to the council.
Can we not can we not do this today, please?
Sure.
Everybody.
Okay.
I want to mention that I have a lot of people that I want to start inviting to our Monday meetings.
Okay.
And these are people that are very good friends of mine that I respect greatly, and I don't want to bring them here if we're going to have these tiffs or these misunderstandings. Anything that is difficult should be taken offline and go into Slack and have that discussion. But let's not do that on Monday meetings. I'm not going to bring anybody in if we're going to do this. Please. Love you all.
Alfred P. Sloan is famous for saying, "Do you guys agree?" When people said yes, he said, "Okay, I will come back when you disagree because clearly you haven't thought it through if you agree."
But there's a difference between disagreeing and having these discussions where where you start to clash over terminology like pejorative. I mean, we're not talking intellectual at that point. We're talking feelings are hurt. And I don't want to bring people in that if people are going to be having hurt feelings and feeling attacked, and that's not good.
I agree with you, Dini, which is why I took a bit of umbrage to the term itself and asked about it. And there are ways to discuss. I completely agree with you. And here is a screenshot I just uploaded of a paper. Is that the kind of writing environment you guys are referring to? Because that's what it looks like to me, writing in Overleaf. Just to make sure we're on the.
Yeah, aren't you using Overleaf for your own article? I mean, how are you producing your articles for ACM in the final format?
Yeah, I have to put it in Overleaf. I don't have a choice. But I do think that it is. I know a lot of people here are specifically technical and very happy to do this kind of writing. But I do think it also is quite exclusionary from a lot of people who don't want to go up and look up how to do a bracket, what the code is to do ampersand and all of that stuff. I don't think that helps the flow of writing really. But clearly there's a different feel. I mean, Rob, you're a wonderfully published book author. How do you write your books?
Pages. I don't want to write code.
Rhoda, nobody writes straight in HTML. I mean, when I did the article for ACM, the many articles I've done recently, I write in my word processing system. That's where I brainstorm. That's where I work. And then the final form, it's saved and goes into Overleaf, and then all of the kind of touches go into it. And Mark did all of that work for us, and that was terrific. But certainly I don't write straight into Overleaf.
Yeah,
I need a different environment, and I need to be able to use my laptop and sit outside. And I have Overleaf on one computer right now, and that's where I throw my stuff.
Yeah, that reflects my own type of writing. Of course, I use Author to write it in, and I've now asked the guys to look into producing export to LaTeX, which produces two files. One will be the references.bib, which should be very, very simple because I kind of have that already. The other one would be the main.txt, and that's where to have a system to convert ampersand into code would be useful. So it seems that we are maybe all more on the same page here, because I'm extremely grateful to Mark. If Mark had not gone through this, there's no way in heaven or hell I would have been able to submit. I'm just not that kind of a detailed person. I can't go through and find all these things. So it seems quite similar, Dini. We write in our whatever favorite environment, and then we put it in here. But this is kind of a really core issue to the future of text, and that is, can we choose where we write? Can we still have a mechanism whereby that text becomes useful to the production and distribution and reading, right?
My response to that is that for the longest time, my lab site was a WordPress site. And we taught a lot of WordPress because our students work for clients, and the clients can't code, right? They want something super easy. And so we've been building in WordPress all these years. Well, guess what? WordPress is very bad for security. And if it gets outdated, very outmoded very quickly, and causes all kinds of security risks in servers. So literally we had to take all the student projects that we keep in archive, convert it all to straight HTML, which deadened the sites, right? All the interactivity, the videos, everything disappeared, but because the WordPress became outmoded and became difficult. So now we're not allowing students to create anything in WordPress. Everything is hand-coded unless the client is already started with some sort of system, right? Because it makes it bad for the server. It's dangerous for the server. WordPress does not last. Not lasting is also antithetical to what we're doing in the lab. One more comment I'll make is that there's this wonderful environment, this wonderful community called Turbulence, doing super avant-garde art, supported by National Endowment for the Humanities, National Endowment for Art, Andy Warhol Foundation. I mean, they had Ford Foundation money. They were just turning out the most beautiful, super avant-garde art, international. Every country basically was represented there that is involved in interactive art and electronic art. Well, guess what? The site is so bad now. It's so dangerous. We had to quarantine it because it was taking down the server. So there's just so much involved in using these systems that are WYSIWYG and simple to use because in the end, they're not good. They're really bad.
Yeah, I'm not here advocating for against any of that. I had my over 10, 15 years worth of blogs in WordPress completely taken over by spammers. So yeah, no, absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that we should write in WordPress, no publish in WordPress, though maybe, well, it can be. All I'm reflecting on is it seems to be that we agree. It is kind of important that we have a choice of where to write, and that should not interfere with how we produce to share either through Publisher or ourselves. That's really the point. And I was really shocked when I had to do I had to go through the whole document and find ampersands as an example. That's just, from my artistic perspective, that's just not cool. It should be able to do that, and that's why Mark is now helping me look into how to export to LaTeX. And it turns out that procedurally it's super easy. We produce two buttons in Author. One is copy BibTeX. You go into Overleaf, paste it. The other one is copy LaTeX. Go into Overleaf, paste it. It has to use a template, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the amount of pain that I've inflicted on Mark this weekend because I didn't get it, we have to get further than this without just being stuck with Word's messy structure that messes up. So, yeah, I think it's all, Word is rare, right? Okay, Fabian, you haven't been here for a while. You look tanned. What's up, man?
Holidays.
How dare you look tanned?
It's despite going to Bretagne, so just only 2 days of sun, but good days. To expand a little bit beyond my tan, I think it doesn't really matter where you publish or how you publish. It's always a pain. You have to conform to a certain format, either technical or just like A4 pages or whatnot. So it's a struggle. It's always been, and ironically enough, even if you don't have constraints, I mean, you still have constraints. Like, how is the audience going to understand your work? People are used to a certain, like, have expectations basically on readability. So I can understand that it's frustrating. I sadly don't have a solution to this. I can only say that regardless of the target platform, format, audience, I feel the pain. A typical example for me has been for sharing prototypes, and I'll have to share videos of prototypes because it's just like one way to represent it, but it's not the thing itself. I don't really have a solution. I think focusing on keeping it responsive and thus as inclusive as possible should always remain like a prerequisite. But yeah, same. It's not easy. And also to go back a little bit to a discussion I had with Leon a while ago, it's when you see such troubles, again, that I think we all have, as a programmer, it's both scary and exciting because you think, oh, I can fix that. Or at least I can attempt to fix this. Like, oh, should we do a WYSIWYG version of it? Should we do a version that is maybe live editing it and then showing the result, but still you can edit the buttons themselves? I mean, there are so many where this is exciting. And that, again, I think I mentioned it in the past, that's exciting, and that's also a burden because then at some point you need to produce whatever you want to share, but then if you can't think straight because you're thinking meta in terms of like, oh, what is the tool itself? Should I challenge the tool? And will challenging the tool improve my writing or whatever I'm producing? So yeah, it's the, I don't want to say daily struggle, but pretty much every time there is something to produce, I encounter such problems, like how I'm going to present it. I think it's a good struggle though, but yeah, I don't have an answer.
I do think we have a great opportunity with the introduction of working in XR to deal with this because it's new, just simply that. And we have JSON as a pipe, like a hose pipe, to move things about, right? Which is great. And with BibTeX and LaTeX, I don't have any problem supporting a lot of it. I think a lot of it does make sense, and Mark and I have solutions to the name thing. We've discussed it a long time ago, and it is quite simply in outside of the actual BibTeX entry for something in the visual meta side of it, we just say in this document, no, in this BibTeX, we use first name, comma, last name, or whatever it is. You literally say what it is in a more formal way, of course, but there are approaches to use standards and then to be more clear about the specific use of the standard this time. You know, like if you need to put external metadata, like whatever it is, just put it in there. So that's why I think it's so exciting with what Andrew has. He has a good working system, and we're not going to start overloading him with metadata now. Of course we're not. But it is really useful to use it as at least a thought exercise. So the whole, I'm going to experiment now. I've decided to put in some money into the whole author export, and I think all of us can learn from that because it may be super simple and just work. It may throw up some surprises. And whatever I do for this kind of work, I'll make all the code free, obviously. So if somebody wants to put in something else, they can do that. Because I do agree with Mark very strongly. As a structure, to be clear, LaTeX is brilliant. Right? How a normal writer gets into it is currently quite suboptimal.
When was the deadline for the human papers?
A month ago.
So it was passed. So it has been done. We're just kind of waiting for the final reviewers' comments, right? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, no, I had a big, massive misunderstanding. So Jessica and Klaus were extremely polite to me and took the paper this weekend. Again, after Mark went through and made sure it didn't look like spaghetti. And so it can be reviewed. It was supposed to be anonymized, which is also an interesting feature of the overlay. If you hide a couple of fields and it does it partly. Of course, I had to go through the paper itself and remove things such as "Our lab, the future of text," remove those most obvious things. But then again, yeah, it even removes the acknowledgements, which I think is really, really clever. Because that's also a very quick and easy way for a reviewer to see who it's from. Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, actually, the fact that just as it happened to be mentioned, the LaTeX anonymizing is actually part of in this case, the ACM package. It does that because basically you just tell it, I want an anonymized document, and it knows what to do with it. It's not a feature of Overleaf or LaTeX as such, but there are other sort of tools to do that on a more generic basis. I was just thinking, reason I was actually put my hand up was to sort of, put some nuance into this thing about the handling and intent of text. It was really interesting. I did my paper for this conference that's coming up. It compiled absolutely clean, which is quite unusual. No errors at all. Passed it into the publisher system, and immediately it sort of all fell apart. And it turned out when I got it back, it was because I had a footnote that had a footnote in it, which is perfectly legitimate. And it was actually deliberately there to make a point about links through documents and things. But this is a classic thing. Somebody just sorted the tech support problem. And when I thought it was really odd when it finally passed through and it came back. And actually what they'd done is they just put a superscript at the end of the footnote, and it wasn't a linking footnote. And I had to, it was the kind of thing I had to write a rather stiff letter back saying, I think you misunderstand. This is not, please be careful about copy editing somebody's work. If it's a mistake, say so. Or, I said, because I'd asked them 3 times, will you send me the log and tell me what's wrong? And it transpired the problem was they didn't know, it's a bit odd, they didn't know how to put it into XML, because I think everything that goes into ACM's TAP system actually gets turned into the XML database that sits behind DLACM. But it's interesting, it's something I want to follow up with them after the conference, because I don't think there's any way that XML is not capable of doing that. So I think it was a problem that the poor front desk support person simply was insufficiently skilled in non-trivial document structure. And I don't say that to be unkind of them, because I bet you they get paid buttons and they get stuff all training. But it does show the problem, once you aren't just writing, I wasn't being flippant when I said, just writing to the council. If I need to write to my local council, said, the vermin are in the back passage again because you're not taking the rubbish away or something. I want to write something quick. It's not really going to be heavily read. That's what I meant by just. And I'm not trying to write a structured document. If I'm actually trying to write an article that has to convey quite a lot of structure and has to communicate quite a lot of different strands to somebody, then a better tool is needed. And, so I use various things. And I probably are unusual. I spent so many years working on other people's data. I just don't have a sort of preference anymore. I'm always working on whatever I've been asked to work on. But there is this issue that it might seem odd that one wants markup, but sometimes you need a way to be absolutely explicit about what you mean, because different things will take those different parts and use them in different ways. And a problem is that with a rendered system like a WYSIWYG, is if you're always working back from the surface design, all you know is whether it looks right or not. You don't actually really know what the underlying structure is there. So although it's a pain in the backside to work in something more structured, a bit like Dini was saying about the HTML, I mean, it's just so much quicker to write HTML. And there are lots of things that will assist you with the markup, but I certainly don't write in a thing like a WordPress, because it just makes all the easy stuff hard. But, it's horses for courses. And as I said, there's no right way.
I was going to say, Mark, it's such an interesting comment, because I'm the editor for Leonardo Reviews, right, which is part of the Leonardo journal. And so once a month, I have all these articles I have to, get ready for the journal. And so this weekend was Leonardo weekend. And I have one reviewer that I really like. I've been working on this journal now for 23 years. But his name is Mike Mosier, and he is a crazy, wonderful, brilliant writer that throws all kinds of weird spellings and uses of punctuation. I mean, he's just brilliant. And so, but what he started realizing is that he needed to tell me that he didn't want something changed, because when I was first reviewing him, I'd see an IN ending for a verb and I would put a G, right? So when I get his documents now, he'll say, I meant to do this, editor, Dini, I meant to do this here. Editor, Dini, I didn't mean to do it here. Just the whole article comes to me with all these, as Peter would say, these kind of little sarcastic comments all the way through. So when I review him, I have to clean up the stuff in the brackets, as well as anything outside the brackets that I see is wrong. But even he'll use like slang words for people's names, and say, I meant to do this because I know this person. Anyways, he's one of the few people that understands that editing, means I have to like take things very seriously. And yes, Peter, I love the blink. Remember the blink? Everything blinked back in the day. Fabienne.
Sorry, can you hear me again?
Yeah.
To step back a bit on what writing is also, is to me, I have, and I guess it's the same for most people, but it's, let's say, I get the idea, and the idea can be waiting for the subway, can be at my desk, it can be literally anywhere. And hopefully I have something to write the idea down, maybe my phone, maybe a computer, whatever. So at that point, I would argue that's at least it's a very important part of writing. Like if you don't have anything to write about, if you don't have the idea, it doesn't really matter if you're good at writing and have all the tools. So you need something to say, basically. So I think that's super important. Just to put like a share, I would say that's 50% of the work. Without it, you go nowhere. But to me, at least, because again, it can happen anywhere, and it often happens in tricky places, like the bathroom or the shower or whatnot. But it's not like the grinding part. To me, that's more like the exciting or mind expanding moment, like what if? And it makes sense. It's both something that is new but yet coherent. It's not like a bad idea. It's something that might have something. And then there is the more like grinding part where it has to be maybe clarified. Maybe if it's programming involved, it has to be tested. There are a bunch of bugs. So it's kind of boring. And yet it's important because maybe you learn that the idea is not so good. Maybe also you learn it exists. Maybe it was bad, but through the grind you have you fix it. Basically you find a way, a solution that you don't have it to. But to me, just all this to say that I have kind of two distinct moments where it's the beginning of the idea or the process starting, and it's still again super important, but I tend to distinguish that with like the actual implementation. Again, either it's writing a documentation or code or whatever, but I tend to have two different moments for this. So I'm wondering if it's the same for most people or not. And thus, if you have like different tools for it, one is more like to capture and just kickstart the process, and others that are more, okay, let's get it done now that this novelty and coherent aspect is done.
I can't write on paper anymore. I lost the ability to write on paper anymore. I can't write anything serious. I take notes. I doodle. I'm constantly, as we're talking here, I'm kind of putting things down on paper, little keywords. I can't write an article. I can't write a novel. I can't write a poem on paper anymore. Everything is gone. And that's been, God, since the 90s. So for 30 years, I've been writing straight onto the computer. And so I made that shift to the point where Frodo, when I was, had a design company for many years where I was laying out, catalogs and doing lots of work for, I had like Bloomingdale's, Neiman Marcus. I had a lot of companies I was doing work for when I had my company. And I would lay out things with a T-square. I mean, that old days with the four color process and all of that stuff. And so, with the typesetter and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, I made the shift into the web back in 95, right? That was not a hard thing to do. And the fact that I had all the colors at my disposal, I had space galore. I wasn't limited to 8.5 by 11. I could scroll to hell and back. I mean, it was revolutionary for my brain. And so J. David Bolter was correct. The writing space changed the way I thought. Fast forward to 2000, and I had to create a little brochure for a conference I was putting on. And I sat down at my table with my T-square and my paper, and I couldn't lay it out. I couldn't create a gutter. I didn't know how to even begin to think about color anymore. The four-color process had gone from my brain. And I sat there at the table and began crying. It was like an automatic response to the realization that I was no longer the same person I had been. And the question I asked myself is, how does this change everything about me? And it did. It changed so much. And now, I don't even look back. But at that moment, it was a realization that I could not go back to the limitations of paper and constraints. And the web was such an incredible thing that made so much possible. Thousands of colors, lots of space, scrolling forever. I was not limited. And there's so many works of art now that I've curated over the years that demonstrate this realization that artists they get to play all over the place. And so, and it's just different. So Leon, to answer your question, I can't speak for everybody, but I write in different places. And now I write certain things on paper, certain things on my iPad, so I answer email, on my iPad sometimes if it's short text message. When it's something that requires real good thinking, concentration, it's on a desktop, where I have time to put into that effort and I can compose. So composing happens here. Answering Frodo and Slack, I can do that over coffee over here on my iPad. So it's different different tools for different purposes. And this is different than what people had 40 years ago. They were limited, and they were told by publishers how things had to be. If I didn't turn in my four color process paper in the way they wanted it, or had the typesetting set up for the typesetter properly, I get kicked back to the end of the line.
But
So
of course. Sorry, Dini. I was just
yeah,
going
so
to
just to finish, I mean, the limitations put to me by the publishing industry, from like, this paper doesn't work with this ink. Well, I don't care about paper anymore. I don't care about ink anymore. I don't have to worry about those things. So, yeah. Boda, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean that's key to what we're talking about. If we don't deliver it in LaTeX correctly or in WordPress correctly, it does still get kicked back to us. And I think it's kind of baffling that it still is that way, even though now it's digital. There needs to be a better process. I think we all agree on that. Two other things is, of course, for some writing by hand is definitely not something we should throw away. And of course, the whole, digital text that digital handwriting text that becomes characters is of course a very interesting thing. And on this topic, if you can all please briefly have a look at the link to our new. I made a slight change to our page for the next volume, and I want to make sure we agree. Very happy to edit it, obviously, but it now has 3 themes, which I think kind of covers what we're dealing with at the top there with the circular bullets.
I would put the text in extended reality first, since that's what the Sloan Foundation is funding. Put that one first. They're going to look at this and wonder why AI is taking precedence over a symposium that they're funding.
Yeah, no, yeah, I'm changing that now. The reason for that was it's just more catchy. But I agree with you. So that's changed. Also, yeah. So, but what is the general feeling of those topic guys? And I
You
have
still haven't
changed it.
changed it. I'm still seeing AI first on mine. I've refreshed.
Try again, please.
Well, you got the 3 listed in bullets, but then below that you have the yellow, orangey
Oh, right.
text.
Oh, I haven't. Yeah, I haven't done that. Sorry, I'll do that now.
And also from a writing perspective, you have text in, text to. The third one should be following in the parallel, text something.
Where? Sorry.
Does that make sense? So grammatically speaking, in usage, you want to parallel the 3 things in the bullet. So text in extended, text to augment.
Yeah, no, I've changed that now. Yeah, absolutely. Leon, is there a comment on the bullets?
No, it's for afterwards.
Okay. I was going to say, Leon, I don't know if you saw it in the notes, but you've been talking a lot about Fediverse things lately, which is very, very important and relevant to us. I think we should definitely consider some of the discussions on LaTeX and Markdown and all of this along those lines as well, so that text you're dealing with doesn't become second-class citizen in this sense. Dini.
Yeah, going back to my parallel comment. So instead of what lies beyond, you'd say text for, helping us understand what lies beyond. So text in, text to, text for.
That
So
just
when you
feels
write,
very okay. Okay, I'll do that. Sorry, I tried it before. It was long, but let me do it now. Sorry, I
but you can't
interrupted.
have,
I didn't mean to. Please repeat. I'm sorry.
well, text, something like text for extending a current understanding of potential for text or something like that.
I
But
don't.
whatever you do, is text to or text for, a text plus a preposition. That's the proper usage of a bullet
Yeah,
list.
but the original, the third one is the original one, and it really is what lies beyond our understanding.
That's fine. I got that, but that doesn't follow good grammatical usage. And we want to come across as being intelligently well-written, communicative people.
Right, but if you give me a
Professional.
sentence I can use, I'll try it. But what I'm saying is that to start it, everything I tried with text, if you start with text, it's kind of the opposite that we're looking for there. So of course I agree with you. It would be nicer to have text, the word text in the beginning of each one of them, but or
Don't make
maybe
it a bullet. Don't make it a bullet. Make it something different. Make it a
maybe
provocation.
text hyphen what lies beyond. No.
Well, no, you need the preposition. Text to, text in, text something. I mean, if you're going to keep it in a bullet, I mean, I'm telling you, professional writing, tech com stuff.
Dini, I understand. If you help, I have worked on this today. I haven't found anything better. If you give me a sentence, I'll be very happy to try it.
Text for understanding the potential for text.
No, but that's not what it means. It means thinking about what lies beyond our understanding of what it might be. It is grammatically a different thing as well.
Okay, then move it out of the bullet and make it a provocation in that first sentence. We have two main themes. You say two themes anyway. Two main themes this year that looks at
Yeah,
what lies beyond our current understanding of potential for text. And you're still using AI before you're using XR. And we need to privilege the XR if this is going to be funded by the Slum Foundation. So just move that third bullet out of there because you don't even say there's three main themes. You say two.
No, that's a mistake from before. I've updated that now. It says our themes this year are. Well, do you all think that the trying to look beyond, which is trying to capture people who aren't really into XR or AI, to capture their perspective, should it maybe not be a theme? Do you think maybe it's just a provocation? I think it's a pretty strong theme to really just look at the unknown unknowns almost. Any strong feelings on this? Okay, I'll take that last bit in. Right, okay, hang on. I'll make it a non-bullet. But any thoughts on the themes, people?
I mean,
How about now?
ah,
Yeah, Peter, I was looking at the page. I can't see you. Please go ahead.
Okay, one observation I've had starting to move into the XR space is that it's very hostile for new people who want to create content because suddenly you have to deal with three-dimensional vectors, four-dimensional vectors, figuring out coordinates, and that all looks very mathematical. And someone with a text background, it's just not the kind of a language you want to use to describe a scene. I'd much rather talk in terms of spatial relationships between things using text rather than try to figure out where the coordinates are in the space. So if you had some sort of a constraint solving system and high-level descriptors of how things should be positioned in an XR space, you'd be able to empower people who, again, don't want to do all those computations to try to figure out what numbers am I going to have to key in for Three.js to be able to position it where I want, to do the right thing. So that would sort of suggest something like CSS as a 3D spatial layout description language that could stay at a text level, almost maybe even appear in ordinary text as like a little parenthetical comment, put this on a panel to the left of some named panel. Describe the layout in terms of, 4 panels angled to face me when I'm sitting. But sort of a domain-specific language. I do know a DSL researcher who's looking to work with academics, Federico Tomasetti in Italy, and he'd certainly be open to talking with us about those kinds of ideas. What could be done in terms of a DSL to hide the ugly math aspects of reading XR descriptions?
So, okay, that's a topic. I guess no further comments on the themes.
Yeah, I think when you now if you're going to move the third bullet out, that third part that says what lies behind, that's a good thing to add. But I would tease that out and put it at the beginning. So imagine our understanding, just take that whole section of imagine our understanding and put that in the introduction. Our themes this year ask what lies beyond our current understanding of potential text. Imagine our understanding expresses as spheres like the one below. Add that up there, and then you have the two orange highlighted sections that come below that. That way, the structure makes sense.
I think that's what I've done. Please reload. And Peter, we're not going to ignore what you said. That is an important topic, but just one moment. Rob first, please.
Oh. I don't know if I can articulate this, but I'm reading a book about the life of the cosmos by Lee Smolin, and he's describing the impossibility of describing the complete universe because we're inside it. And you have to break it down into parts and pretend that there's a boundary. And he's using spheres a lot in that description. So it seems to me that the unknown is the fact that we are, as I've decided to just call it, inside the elephant instead of outside the elephant, touching parts of it, and constructing an image of what we think text would be like in the future, or how we would be manipulating or using it, is a really difficult problem. I'm just throwing that out. I don't know what to do with it.
Write an article on it. Thank you, Rob.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense.
I mean, I'm somebody who lives inside text, so yeah, thinking about its confines, it's not easy from the inside, and you can't stand outside the universe and look at it. So,
Leon, I think your comment's interesting, but I mean, Andrew and I are working right now on how to work with this class that I'm teaching in XR this coming fall. He's going to be working with me in the class. And so do we have 16 weeks? Is that long enough to teach people to create something in XR? And the answer is no, if they don't know already how to do it. And so Andrew's talking about putting together some templates that make it possible for them to fill in ideas. So there's not been yet a template produced for XR development, but I imagine it's coming. I mean, there's not been a push for it because, who's making things except big companies that can afford 3D modelers and stuff, right? So I think the problem is the usage and, who's got access and who knows how to code, so yeah, I think you're right. There needs to be something, but there's nothing right now. Except Andrew.
I think that is one of the key problems we're trying to solve, and that is exactly when we're talking about how to read in XR, the question is read what? And that, of course, as we've discussed many times, is related to how to author for reading in XR. And it's something I think we can probably start discussing a lot more without necessarily without implementing it, because when you write semantically, which is something we all agree we should, if you highlight something in your text, there should be for a reason and tag it or whatever. These things should be in Andrew's environment and others, something that has a spatiality to them. And that spatiality need not necessarily be explicit. It doesn't necessarily need to say small back top left-hand corner, even though it could. It could quite simply be, this is the equivalent of an end note, but done in a way that the systems understand that. So the user can say, I want all my endnotes on a wall. I want all the endnotes underneath the text. I want all the endnotes hidden, and so on. So it really goes back to our main discussion today of what should text be in this environment. And I'm all for WYSIWYG style editors. You know, that's what I build. That's what I need. But Peter, you said something in the text there. You said it's kind of crazy that, paraphrasing, you didn't say the word crazy, that the ACM, for instance, cannot specify a format that's robust. I think we can do that. I think we can do it for one single reason, and that is what we're doing with Andrew. So I think that we can definitely start experimenting when we get to it, where you're sitting with whatever software you want. When you come to the equivalent of putting it into Overleaf, there is structure in there that we can have experimented with as a community. When it opens up in what Andrew's done, it's not just a rectangle. I think that's a really, really interesting challenge for us. What do you all think about that?
Mark's got his hands up. Mark, darling.
I was going to make a different point, so I was just leaving a pause so someone could respond to Freud's question. But I can continue if there isn't one.
Well, like I said, though, I think there's different modes to. I mean, I used to teach writing, right? I mean, before I was here, I taught advanced composition. I taught freshman composition. I taught creative writing. I mean, I teach digital writing, digital storytelling. So I've been writing, all my life in this field in different modes. And the thing that we tell people is that there's different kinds of writing for different kinds of purposes. There's different audiences. And now we have such a wide variety of ways to express ourselves in different mediums, right? So the possibilities are vast, but it doesn't mean that people know what to do with them. So they really need to learn, like when you're trying to make a point that has some analytical concepts, you don't put that in a text to somebody. That's not a good way to express yourself analytically, right? That's just a quick little, hey, what time are we meeting up today? So getting them to understand the rhetorical situations of everything they're doing, right? So going back to the classics and rhetorical writing, right? So the canon, arrangement, all of those things that I had to teach when I taught graduate courses in, English and composition for Rhet Comp. I mean, those things are all important now more than ever. And the sad thing is that we're not teaching it anymore. Composition classes are falling by the wayside because universities are cutting Rhet Comp programs all over the country. Technical communication on our campus is dwindling. The whole certificate's gone. So now students are in my program and I'm having to teach them, like when you write me an email, don't say yo Grigar. What the hell? You just, how do you even talk to people in these environments? And it's a lost art. And it doesn't help that our candidate for president is, crazy on Twitter, and so just the whole communication structure and process is just broken down. It makes it really hard to communicate with people.
Just absolutely, just a brief recap for Brandel. We're talking, the conversation today started a little bit on the issue of writing for an academic institution like the ACM and then having to produce either a perfect Word document, which is clearly not possible all the time, or LaTeX, and the issues of taking things into LaTeX and having to write code for ampersands and all of that good stuff. Then we talked more about what the underlying text should be, the benefits of HTML and so on. And now we're talking about what I think is very, very exciting, and that is composing for XR, writing for XR, which may mean writing in Blender or equivalent for those who can, may mean writing mathematically, but it could also mean really marking up what we're writing so that the XR reading environment knows how to handle the elements of it. And this is where LaTeX may be very, very useful, provided there are tools and methods through which the user can put their thoughts into it. And one final thing, there's also been highlighting of different kinds of writing. Writing notes and writing little things is very different from writing a considered piece to be sharing with a peer community. Mark?
Yeah, I was just reflecting on it was Peter's comment earlier about the fact that, and I would with it, which I record that in a sense it feels quite technical to try and do something in this medium. But then I reflect on all the books I've just read in the last couple of years on note taking and indexing. And okay, the change of the pace of change is faster, but we had to people invented indexes, people invented A to Z ordering. The things that we think are normal now and sort of in a sense, somehow part of the firmament absolutely weren't. And so the fact that this new medium sort of seems rather rough edged is because you really can you can see all the edges. It will be in a time sort of distance that we don't yet know. It will all be much smoother. I mean, look at the web now compared to the web in 1990. It's the same thing, but it's a lot better in many. It's definitely sort of shinier and nicer compared to what it was. So I think something we need to hold on to is the fact that it shouldn't surprise us. It's frustrating, but it shouldn't surprise us at all that things are perhaps not as advanced as we like because they're still being made.
Just a brief note before Brandl takes over. I don't actually agree with that last statement because in the 90s we had things like Go Live, where basically anybody could publish on the web. Now, to publish on the web, you have to at least have a WordPress account. And so if you tell people just to publish, I'm not saying things haven't gotten better as well, but I don't think it's black and white that it's better. I think there are things that have been left behind, especially for non-technical people. Yeah, Dini?
So going back to those GUI programs like iWeb, Work and Dreamweaver, yeah, people could get things up on the web, but they wouldn't last and they wouldn't look good. So I used iWeb. So I was managing something like 13 sites at one time. So I was trying to do the ones that were not super important for long term. I was using iWeb for, right? Things that were for art, I used HTML. So I had different methods at WordPress for all my classes. That way things would.
I'm just raising my hand. I'm not even saying.
Oh, I wasn't sure if you're going to say something. And so to the point I'm going to make is that anything I didn't make in HTML is dead. It's gone. So yeah, make it and go live, but it's not going to last very long, and it's going to look like crap. The code for iWeb, by the way, when I tried to like move things out of iWeb into the web, it's all gobbledygook. I couldn't copy and paste the code. I had to recode everything by hand. So the experiments I used iWeb for, they're gone. They're gone. I can't do anything with them. And it's not supported by Apple anymore. And I thought it was a really nice little program.
The work that was produced through apps like Go Live are absolutely viewable on the web today. If you don't like the visual style of it, that's absolutely totally fair thing. But everything that goes on the web will die because nobody owns a piece of the web. All we can do is rent.
Oh, darling, anything that's on the, I can get with the Wayback Machine. If I have the URL, it's there. I tracked down. So funny story, last week I got an events planning guide from the university that was pretty scary.
Okay.
It looked like a draconian thou shalt not 10 commandments to the faculty about what we can plan and not plan by some young guy, 25 years old, just hired by the university who had never been in academia before. Anyway, I asked for the previous guide because I couldn't find my copy. He never responded. So we dug out it from the web using the URL from Wayback Machine, tracked down the original planning guide, and I was able to sit down with him on Thursday, compare and contrast his 10 commandments to the general, hi, you want to put on an event? This is how to do it kind of mentality. So anyway, he thought none of us would have access to this. He thought it was gone. And I tracked down all the URLs by the Wayback Machine. So yeah, nothing's dead on the web if it's done properly.
There are plenty of things dead on the web. And if you look up link rot in academia, it's a pretty serious thing. Anyway.
Yes, I know all about, we talk about link rot in my lab all the time. But frankly, even Christy Sheffield Sanford's website from 1997, Holly tracked it down and reconstructed it using the Wayback Machine.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. Hi, Alan and Brandl. Please go.
I was really taken by what Dini was saying about the rhetorical contrasts between different modes, and that if you're trying to make an analytical point, in not to do it in a text message, and the way that that seems like perhaps one of the reasons why people have been dismantling these courses is because for a lot of the people who are part of that administrative elite, that seems self-evident, and maybe it is. I think that I have my own reasons for thinking that there are, if something has the ability to allow people to infiltrate class boundaries, then it's fair game for elite people to remove, because if people know from dinner table discourse how to do something, but there's also a course on it, then those are two ways that are somewhat actually in opposition to each other. But anyway, uh, the that failure to understand the rhetorical distinction between the SMS and the missive reminds me of Google Wave and a number of Google products from the early teens, and the way in which, from a technical perspective, I mean, and this is an important recognition, an important realization. So, for people not familiar, Dini knows what I'm talking about, but Google Wave was this project that Google released, announced to much fanfare in, I think, 2009. And the central premise was that there is no functional difference in a technical underpinning kind of perspective from chat to email to documents to anything in between. So anything from being able to react with a smiley face to penning a Wikipedia article is functionally running on the same enough substrate that you can kind of munge them all together. And so their answer to that was, let's make things that are waves, that are kind of, people were still really excited by Firefly at that time, Serenity, that TV show and movie. And so their communications were called waves. And so they built this thing, and almost immediately it was an obvious disaster. Nobody had any idea what they were going to put into it, including me. I was so excited. I was almost willing to stand my own server up for it. But the fact that it fit none of these rhetorical boundaries just meant that it was actually impossible to figure out what kind of communication was appropriate in it, in terms of what is the status of this document, which part should I reread, why would I use this piece inside here. And so it was shut down within, I think, close to 18 months, just because they had so little concept of what it was for. And it was a phenomenal, and they managed to use it to constitute large amounts of Google Docs later on, so it wasn't a total waste. But Docs was a document. It was clear what it was for. So yeah, I think that rhetorical distinction, not just in terms of making sure that people know how to compose, but yeah, even down to the tools and the formalisms of how those tools are presented are things that we need more help with than we realize.
I would argue that we're having the same trouble in this kind of face-to-face, in-person, online, live in the moment chatting too. I mean, I started teaching in Zoom long before we had the pandemic lockdown, but the lockdown definitely was a crash course in how to deal with, teaching and how to communicate with students. But the argument that VH people were using, if you followed Twitter back then, was that students are so stressed out over the pandemic, they can have their cameras off. And that was a stance of the university. If students wanted their cameras off, then we let them have their cameras off. But at the same time, we didn't know if they were even there. So I'd call on somebody and I'd say, hey, so what do you think about this? And they couldn't answer because they weren't there, right? They'd turn your cameras off and then go to the bathroom or go. And so we were talking to an empty room. So you see yourself and then like all the other 23 blocks on the Zoom chat with just their names, not even a picture, right? And you're talking to yourself, and that kind of experience is not a good teaching environment. So teaching became very difficult. We also use Slack. So using Slack for, in the moment, but going back to Zoom, even our discussions here can get very tense and difficult because we're not seeing the visual clues that we normally see. So we're using like thumbs up and all these react buttons, hearts, You know, I was at ELO retreat yesterday for 3 hours and it got really gnarly, a little bit gnarly discussions we had. And every once in a while, somebody would go, heart, heart, because that was a way to show that we were not getting difficult. We were just being adamant about our position, right? Heart, I love you, but how about this? And but that was the only way to get that kind of information across. And that's not very academic. You know, this looks very goofy, but we have to do that. Else, when Mark uses the word pejorative, Froda, you're going to think he's being grumpy, and he's really good heart. But this is a problem with contemporary communication. And one more thing, and I'll shut up. The COM program on my campus, I'm friends with the folks that teach it. They're not teaching this kind of rhetorical use of these online, in-person, live technologies. They're not teaching this, and they should. And you look so psychedelic now, Brandel, I don't even know what to say. What is that all about?
That's just another hand gesture like heart, but I like it.
That's not good in Italy, though.
No, it's the horns.
I wouldn't do this. We just came from Rome last year, Randall. But we're doing all these things and these smiley faces and stuff, and it's considered unacademic, but we have to do it or we're going to misunderstand each other. So Froda, I know when you do your hands up like that, like you're going to say something, I stop because I think, okay, you want to talk. That's not what you mean. And I still haven't gotten it through my head that you're just trying to get in the queue. You know, so how do we communicate these things so that there's not any misunderstandings and there is goodwill? There is goodwill. So when we use a term, it's like we're not attacking anybody. We love each other. We really mean to be kind, you know. How do we get that across? And that's tough. You're shaking your head, yes, Froda? Is that yes?
No, I'm shaking my head that I'm listening.
Okay. But do you guys agree that this also is a rhetorical issue that we need, you know, that not just us, but everybody's struggling with?
Oh yeah, my experience with meetings, you know, we don't use exactly Zoom, but we use, you know, Zoom like for work. And in big meetings, especially, there's often more than one conversation going on where people have the ability to kind of flip people little bits of information. There's a lot more silence actually in a real face-to-face meeting as people are kind of looking, and you can be clear about what everybody's attention is on, especially if what you're doing is reviewing something. And yeah, the lack of those contextual things, the lack of the ability. So like none of us actually knows what order we're all in the little Zoom windows, and everybody's windows can be different sizes and things like that. So yeah, there's no aspect beyond these borders, even when they're on, that we are aware of in terms of our mutual presence. And there are lots of ways in which even this is privacy intrusive, and more would be more privacy intrusive. But yeah, like what we submit to the collective for the purpose of communication is something that wasn't under negotiation when we were co-present in a space, and we've premised a lot of communications and modes and contextual awarenesses, good or bad, off of that, and now we don't have it. It's something that very few people appear to be in a position to understand the conceptual implications of. And so it feels like we're a long way off finding something that actually works for us in a Zoomy world. Sorry if I jumped the queue, Mark.
No, I think Leon had his hand up, but possibly it was taken down by the system, which was actually one of the points I was going to make in that. So for some of the things, it's these things, and I understand why they've been put in there, and they seem like really good ideas, but it's actually quite difficult in this sort of scenario to sort of say, right, there's something I mean, because you sort of need the hand up to remind yourself you're going to say it, because unless you write it on your jotter or something, by the time somebody then comes around and says, yes, and it's all flown. So yeah, and I don't have an answer for it, but it's interesting. And it is harder than it probably is face to face, but again, it's unsurprising because this is actually a remarkably new medium, or it's a new medium used at scale and regularly compared to, what we've had before. Thanks.
So it's also weird because in this kind of context, we're seeing our faces, right? We can see how we look to other people, kind of. It's just the opposite, right? You're looking at me from a position that I'm looking at myself in a position you're not seeing me. So the other thing I find interesting is that for women, we're expected to smile a lot. So when you're talking, the way we're trained as women is to smile and nod, and look like we're really engaged and smiling, because I find myself looking serious. And as I see myself looking serious, I look bitchy when I'm not trying to be bitchy. I'm just serious. I'm an academic, right? And so in academia, we're not expected to smile and nod. So when I get in these rhetorical contexts where I'm with people that's not academic, like, a nonprofit meeting or something with clients, I sit and I make sure I've got my smile face on and I'm smiling and nodding politely. And in this environment, I don't know what to do. I'm very confused about how to behave, because there's some academics in this room and there's some non-academics in this room. So do I come across being grumpy? Not grumpy, I'm happy. Heart, heart. But it's a difficult situation because I'm looking at myself and going, oh, I look really bitchy this morning. And I'm not. I'm really happy. I like everybody. I'm going to give me my birthday's coming up. And thank you, Frodo, for the big, gigantic basket of treats. And I have to say the pistachio and cottage cream cookies from Fortnum & Mason goes really well with bourbon, particularly Basil Hayden. So I've been eating them one a day, one a night, watching the Olympics.
It was interesting, Dini, as you said, because when you started just now and you said, and I'm used to seeing myself, at which point I think it was Rob coughed, and I don't know if anyone else, but the camera changed. So you were now saying, I'm looking at myself, and we're now looking at someone different. And again, totally unintentionally.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, is that you can set your system so that it's the speaker showing up on the screen. So I don't know what the hell you're looking at. Right now, I've got it set up so we're all talking, and so the screen lights up green when someone's speaking. So I'm like the Hollywood squares, right? But you could very well be seeing this so that I'm showing up big, which scares me, on your screen. Yes, Rob.
Does anybody know why Zoom keeps doing that?
Yes, because you have a little view. You have a view button up here. If you look at the top right-hand side of your screen, it says recording. There's a view and a little square, and you could choose between speaker, gallery, or multi-speaker.
Oh, multi-speaker, that's a new one.
But gallery is where I usually have mine set because I like to see everybody's. It's like being in a room where everybody's talking and I can see your response to each other.
Oh God, now you just leapt up to the top of the screen.
I know. That's the other thing, is we move around like Hollywood
That's
Square.
Multi-speaker? That's new. I thought it was just gallery and speaker. Well, I use gallery and it keeps jumping around, like, as you said. It's a weird semantic phenomenon in Zoom, and I don't understand why. I'd like to see it be in the same place.
Yeah, and then looking at your backgrounds, I mean, I see you're just in a black area, and Brandel is blurred, and Andrew's blurred. Peter and Alan are just pictures, right? Which is great to have pictures. The rest of you are in your normal facility. Mark, I love always looking at the Ted Nelson behind you, right? Leon, I get a sense of your room. Frodo, you're in a space that I recognize from visiting your house once. Leon, you're in a office it looks like your home office. But I mean, the context is really different, and it changes sometimes for all of you. But it's very different. It's just a very different environment. We still haven't sussed it out properly.
Peter never changes his expression.
He's adorable. Always adorable. I get the smile on my face. See?
I don't know if I told you the guy. So when the pandemic started, there was one chap who was obviously a bit of a whiz with video, and he recorded himself as a video background coming in and giving himself a cup of coffee. And then just sort of at the end of about a 10-minute loop. So he'd been on a call, and then suddenly he came in, put a cup of coffee down, turned around to himself on the video, but I said thank you, and walked out. And there's silence in the room because there'd just been a glitch in the matrix.
Well, Brandon, I have to say I'm using your video that you gave at the Apple event where you're presenting, and I have to say I didn't even recognize you because you don't smile a lot, which is fine. You do break into a smile, but you don't sit and smile the whole time. In the video, you're smiling very big and the entire time, and your voice is very precise and high and this, and it sounds so corporate. It's like, that's not Brandel. That's not my Brandel. It's not Brandel. So when I show the video, I'm saying, this is not really Brandel. This is Brandel's twin brother.
That's funny. Well,
Brandel.
you get the impression as you're building them. They're not our videos. We're emissaries for Apple, and I'm at peace with that. But it's an interesting sort of contrast in terms of what you're what it's there to do and what that means as an acceptable sort of range of modes. I'm interesting that it comes off as such a distinction that it's not me, but yeah, like I said, I think on balance that's probably where I would prefer it to be.
You're a very friendly person. I mean, I'm not saying you're not, but you come across being like, "Hi, I'm Brandel." It's like, that's not Brandel.
Leon.
Yeah, can everybody hear me? My connection is a bit wobbly. Okay. I wanted to go back to something Dini said before, is that when she started to, get familiar with the web, her typing or her writing actually sort of disappeared, and she started to type on the web. I started to think about this, and first of all, I was surprised that this didn't already happen with typing machines or the typewriters. And second, I'm also thinking, is there a relationship between, let's say, slow and fast communication or slow and fast text? Sort of like if it's hard to publish something, let's say a paper book, it's pretty hard. You have all these steps, and compared to publishing to the web, like, is there a relationship with, let's say, smart people being more focused on the slow publishing side of things, where there's many checks and that kind of stuff, and maybe people who are not really into this kind of, or they don't really care about this spectrum of slow and fast knowledge or information, they tend to, for example, be totally fine with social media and publishing on social media, and not really feeling the urge to create a website or something, which might also be a bit harder to publish. I was just thinking about might be a relationship there.
I can't speak for everybody, but once again, it's rhetorical. It's a rhetorical situation. So I just finished a book that got published in January or March, and it took me about a year to write the book with Mariusz Pozarski. It's a collaboration, and then it took several years to get it published, right? So it ended up being 3 years for that process. Usually it's like 2 to 3 years, depending on the publisher. Cambridge is really slow, really slow. Review process is really slow. And we had no changes by the time we got it back. It's like, okay, so that was a waste of a year. But that took a lot of thought, a lot of processing power went into that work. At the same time, I write for the Digital Review. I'm asked to I have like a normal essay I have to write for every issue. So an editorial comment. That takes me a couple of days to write. It's still processing power, but there's not the heavy theoretical, lots and lots of references. I mean, writing the paper for the Human Workshop, Mark, I mean, that took some thought to do that. It came out of Mariusz's in my book, but it was beyond what we had already written, right? It took it a step further. So the trick for a lot of us, Leon, is that we do this heavy research to do a book, and then we take pieces of it and we turn it into different rhetorical situations. Short little article here, presentation there, a blog post over here. And so it allows us to double dip, but also think a little bit differently about that topic. So that's one method that we use. So I think it depends on the people. And then going back to the typewriter comment, when I made the leap to typewriters, know that in 8th grade, I was forced to take a typewriting class because all girls were going to be a secretary one day. And I purposely failed that course because I did not want to be a secretary. Now I'm the worst typist in the world, which I really regret. I can't keyboard with a damn. And my Macintosh laptop now doesn't do T very well, so all my T's are missing when I write something. But yeah, so I think but making the leap to typewriting eventually, that took some thought. That took some effort. But it didn't change the way I thought. It didn't change my brain structure. My brain is different now than it was in 1994. Randall, you are muted, I think.
So I'm diametric opposite in terms of how I learned to type and write. I'm one of the few games apps that we had on our computer in 1990, before most people, including me, had the internet. I was on the internet in 92, but was a typing tutor program. So I've been 90 words a minute typist since I was sort of 8 years old. And my script is sort of commensurately terrible because I didn't have to lean on it at that time. But nevertheless, I write much better ideas than I type. And I think that the mode and the speed of it, the actual hand cramp notwithstanding, I get a pretty sore hand to the point where I needed sort of disability arrangements in university to be able to type my essays because no matter how good the writing was, the text was unreadable. Yeah, so Engelbart's talk about the de-augmented brick is something that I take to heart a lot, and I think that I would love to see brick poetry, brick pencil poetry. He talked about the de-augmentation of attaching a brick to a pencil and how much more difficult that would be to write, and how great it would be to get the other brick off the normal pencil. But I think that all of these different weights and quantities related to writing produce different writing, and so I think that I'm not sure if you've ever tried to just dash off your notes, Rob, in Q&A form, but I would suspect that it would take on a different flavor simply because of the mechanics of the thing.
Yeah.
Hard to get good.
Yes, I can imagine that's a challenge. And something that I did a few years ago. I should do some more interesting things more recently than 7 years ago. But this code pen I wrote is my first National Novel Writing Month writer. And you can't backspace or delete in it, so it's more like a typewriter than a normal text editor. And I find it really interesting. I've only used it a couple of hours in my life, but it was really fascinating to realize that even without de-augmenting in the form of slowing text down from scribbling it in by hand, simply not being able to do anything but append off of the end is sort of an experience so unlike anything else that you end up with a very different relationship to the text and what the text is for, which I find really, really fascinating and really enjoyable because different people do different things in terms of how correct they expect their text to be, but I tend to correct and perfect everything at the absolute moment that it happens. So I'll backspace everything to get to a typo or a mistyped character, or even if I want to change a word. So it ends up this endlessly expanding wavefront of I'm not going to call it good, but perfect text. And this NaNoWriMo writer made me do something very different, which is to sort of accept my failures and move on. And I think that if you were to extend that in more directions and use it over a longer period of time, you would have a really interesting impact on what it is you are producing.
I did an experiment some time ago, 2009 or 10, on writing for Twitter. I was doing what it's called Twiterature. And I was doing little short stories on Twitter. So it was 140 characters at that time. So 140 characters total story. And so it's called the Micro ELIP project. And I published it, and it's in the ELC4 and stuff like that. So it became a published work. But taking an entire fictive environment, story, and getting it down to 140 characters. So there's plot, there's conflict, there's characters, there's theme. So that was a really good exercise on how to condense my thinking in a very focused way. And there's something like 24 stories, because it was over a 24-hour period. So every night, every hour on the hour, I'd publish the little new post. And then I invited people to add their stories to mine. And then I collected all of that to see what we could pull together in 140 characters. It was a really interesting activity. Leon.
Deanie, are you talking about sort of compressing text or limiting to a certain amount of characters?
It's constrained writing. So if you think about sonnets are a form of constrained writing, right? There's certain amount of lines, there's iambic pentameter, so a certain amount of stresses and bits of text. So when I was 1 in 20, I heard a wise man say, "Give crowns," that kind of constrained writing. Haiku is constrained writing. So I saw Twiterature as a form of constrained writing. 140 characters, that's it. So how do you tell a story in 140 characters? And I achieved it. I mean, that was a surprise. I achieved it. And I was able to tell, Richard Brautigan told a terrific story called I have to think of the title, but it's 36 words. The Scarlatti Tilt. Fantastic story. That just was my always my go-to fiction story when I taught creative writing. Yeah, Rob?
There's the 6-word story. There are anthologies of it.
Yeah. I subscribe to those.
For sale baby shoes, brand never used.
Yeah, and on Twitter they'll put a picture up and they'll say, caption this in 6 words. And or give you a poem in 6 words over this picture. And I do that. So I constantly am trying to condense my thinking so that I can be clear without going on. It's easy to write 50,000 pages and just put dribble out there. It's harder to write constrained. Leon?
I was just reminded by, I've also read some sutras, these Indian scriptures, and I also noticed that they left out all the verbs, so it's very condensed, almost like in a super short sentences, only maximum 4 or 5 words, and actually the books about it are more like comments on these short things. So they're explaining it, expanding it, and I just wonder why they actually do that. I was thinking back in the day, maybe they want the seeds to be commented in popular language or as some kind of preservation way. But anyways, that was one thing. Another thing, I also noticed that Brandel said that the sort of medium really, also decides, how well it translates thoughts to the medium. And I noticed that these days you have these LCD tablets, like not a remarkable, but just these very simple ones. Also, children use them. You can get them for $7 or something. And I noticed that I use this much more to just scribble down and make some doodles for, let's say, diagrams or even a checkbox or a combination of it. I use this much more than, for example, like a tablet or a phone, because there you have to open an app. And for some reason, I thought I would use that more because it has more possibilities. But it turns out I somehow keep going back to like something really simple like this.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my observation. Fabien.
Yeah, quickly, I'll put in the chat my aphorisms. So I have some little short sentences that try to be wise, I guess. And I wanted also to say that in programming, there are also the demo scene, and one of the category of the demo scene is like 60K or like 4 kilobytes, where you basically try to have the most amazing either visual experience or story or game or whatever, but in something that should be smaller than an image, like it doesn't even make sense, and yet somehow people manage. I really recommend it intellectually. It's really either as a participant or just to watch or experience the content. It's kind of crazy how many things we can put in few characters. And I'll have to wish you. I gotta run, and I'll see you hopefully all in a couple of weeks with a better time. I don't know. Sorry. Take care. Bye bye.
Back to the pound. Yeah. Fabienne's hand still up?
Is that a mic drop? You stick your hand up and leave the meeting.
Brother, you're awfully quiet today. What's going on?
Yeah, no, I'm listening. Since you asked, I am actually extremely stressed about this. I feel the lack of progress, not coding progress with you, Andrew, but the lack of progress is really quite frightening. And also, my main thing of if you're going to do something with a computer, the computer needs to know what it is, which I think is quite obvious and self-evident, is really generally falling in the community on deaf ears. You know, I emailed people at the ACM, the right people, last week and say, let's test something, and absolutely nothing back. So I feel a lot of, I feel that's kind of scary. I'm not saying that my particular PhD visual meta has to be implemented, not at all. But I feel that there is a lot of XML will be the panacea to save everything in the world. And yet XML isn't a reading format. It scares me. Yesterday, Emily and Edgar and me, we had this wonderful weekend. We went to an air show on Friday, went to a farm, and yesterday with this, I was actually very, very dizzy. I had problems leaving where we were staying, and it's been a bit like this today. And a part of it, I just have to be honest, you know, there's a lot of things in the community, and I'm not just talking about us, that kind of needs to happen. We're looking at so many big challenges in the world today that the world just hasn't had before. Climate change being, of course, number one. And, you know, you read the reports and there, you know, people arguing over whether the Paris opening ceremony was a horrible thing for Christians. I mean, the social media stuff is, of course, obscene. And I do think that the barrier to entry to academia is a bit false. I think that we should really take into account the importance of a well-structured text, absolutely no question, which is why I think LaTeX is good and we need ways to get into it. But the experience of having to have Mark tell me, like I'm a child learning to write, that no, you can't write ampersand, it has to be slash these dollar signs and all this stuff, just is such a huge, I feel, barrier. For some people, it's fun. So yeah, no, I'm having, it's stressful.
Can I respond to that? So when Trump got elected here, I had a young faculty member that I had hired. He was 28 years old, lovely young man. He had been a student of ours, ended up getting MFA, and I hired him back because he was just so smart. And he was so depressed. I mean, he was just, I mean, he was a manly man, but I never had seen him so upset. Right. So the thing I said to him, I'm going to say to you, Frode, and to anybody else in this room, the lovely thing about being 70 years old is I lived through the 60s. I lived through the Kennedy assassination, both Kennedys, Martin Luther King, the Vietnam War, protest against Johnson, Nixon. I lived through the AIDS pandemic, so when our pandemic started in 2020, I had already lived through and lost so many of my friends, some of whom were straight, right? I have lost people through the years, through these getting depressed, killing themselves over the situation. We have we have had climate change before. That was what the Ice Age was all about. The question we need to ask ourselves is, how do we prepare ourselves to emerge intact so that we can solve these problems? And I think these are solvable problems. I don't think it's going to be easy if Trump loses or wins for anybody, but I'm already in a mental place where I feel like I can deal with these things. And my job, as I see it as an older person teaching, is to imbue that to my students and to give them help them find their strengths. Whatever their vision is for the world, help them find that and find the voice to express that. I'm not depressed about the future. I was very sad at Biden's performance at the debate, but I didn't feel like all was lost, right? I never feel hopeless. One thing I'll say before I end is that my second master's is in Dante. I specialized in Dante. And unlike a lot of people, I preferred the Purgatorio over the Inferno because it was the most philosophical of the three books. The thing I loved about the Purgatorio is that the virtue that emerged as the most important virtue wasn't faith and it wasn't love, it was hope. And that without hope, we can't have love. Without hope, we can't have faith. It is the most important thing we can feel every day. I do worry about things, but I have hope and I do have faith and love for my fellow human beings and thinking we will prevail. We will prevail, right? And so I encourage all of us, whether you live in Europe or the US, to realize that we do have a future and we have choices, and text can help us express those thoughts, but we should not ever give up, ever. So yeah, Galaxy Quest, that's me. Whatever. But I mean, the nice thing of being old, I will say, is that I have lived through a lot of shit. And I will continue to do so. Brandel.
Yeah, I obviously have not lived as long, but I have read history and talked to a bunch of people about what it's like being in places. What I was gonna, and I concur. Like, things are terrible. There are uniquenesses to what appears to be terrible at the moment, but they rhyme with things that have happened, and it hasn't always turned out well. But something will emerge, and we'll see. And our lot is to figure out what to do to affect that, and what to do with it as a result. I wanted to talk about the technological to the aspect of writing, because I like I've said before that I think in about, it might have even been 2010, but as no earlier than 2012, I was really interested in I was interested in virtual reality, and I was like, what's the most boring thing you can do with virtual reality? And that was going to be word processing. Haha, word processing is boring. Since then, hopefully it's clear that I have more respect for writing now. I realized that writing per se is this millennia long global project of understanding how to encode thought, and then to express it, and then to have thought. And that all of the things that we think are bleeding edge, 5-10 years, actually have their precedence in centuries old practices and traditions that are still nevertheless technology. And that's the important duality of it, is that it's old as hell, but it's also still technology. So none of it's inevitable, and none of it's natural, and all of it's constructed through communities of practice working on it, intentionally or not. Much of it has been inadvertent, and writing is this glorious treasure that we've been passing around from generation to generation. That really is the most significantly sort of singular culmination of the last, I don't know, 6 millennia of development on it. And in that context, that sort of, deep historical bordering on anthropological, archaeological time is one that we have to understand, like, it only moved that fast. And we can maybe do it a little bit faster, but it's that big. It's that important in terms of human development. And that's dazzling and dizzying and a little bit sickening. But I think we can push it a little bit faster, but we need to be realistic about what writing is, how intrinsic it is to the human character and the societies that form around it, and be willing to sort of watch and wait, as well as to sort of lead and build and demonstrate opportunities and risks related to what writing is.
I would just quickly say it's intrinsic because we made it so, but it's something we have to teach. It's not innate.
Mhm.
So it's a non-innate extrinsic aspect of humanity. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Frodo. Please explain why are we not a community of practice here?
I agree. I will answer that. I agree with you, Brandel, that there has been a long history and there will be a long history, but some things in technology are accelerating. I mean, what we've seen since we started talking with AI is just insane, and it's not going to stop anytime soon. That is one.
It'll stop when it runs out of money. OpenAI is going to be out of business in 24 months.
Then what though? Something's going to replace it.
Another bubble, yes. I mean, insofar as there will be another bubble, but it's a bubble like metaverse and crypto and big data. It's not. We'll see what companies like Apple have the ability to deliver, but artificial intelligence per se, and particularly generative AI, is much more of a dead end than most people in the market are willing to admit. It doesn't have the benefits, and the laws of physics won't get bent to the point where it makes economic sense to make use of it in the way that people have been sort of insisting that it should be possible to do so cavalierly. Sorry, go on, Frodo. I didn't mean to. I understand that there.
It's roasting the planet.
On that, I have one word, and that is llama. There are open source, downloadable AIs that are useful, and they do impact how we think and work. So to write AI off as a fad or a bubble, I think is facile. It's not useful. It's very reactive. I don't know what Apple will be doing. There was a lot of great demos and a lot of, and also Apple, of course, has very specific political biases in the world. They have very specific ways they want us to see the world, and I say that as an Apple user. When I'm talking about, I don't feel we're a community of practice here. Like some of the things we discussed in the beginning of this, we have an amazing opportunity here. We could work on how to author for XR. We don't. Every time the discussion comes up, how can we work on putting together in a fashion that can be redone by others, primarily textual information to be viewed in XR? The discussion goes into all kinds of other things. We don't practice that. The notion of metadata, many of you individuals have talked about it, but to me, metadata is not an external thing saying this document is so-and-so. It is all the data that says what something is. It is structural, it's connective, it's all of that stuff. For whatever way it's going to be, for the individual user, if we don't have it, we have dead documents, right? I think that is really quite scary. And, there are ways we can deal with this. I showed Mark this weekend how when I deal with Overleaf, when I go into my author document, click on the citation, copy citation, paste it into Overleaf, and it just works because I use BibTeX, right? There are so many things we can do, and it stresses me a lot. It's fine we have philosophical discussions. It's very, very important. It's part of our community. But if you just take a screenshot of the people on the screen right this second, the ability to implement, to test is phenomenal. I mean, just look at Leon talking about the Fediverse. it is a very important component on it. It's not an academic document, but it certainly fits into it. You know, so I feel also with the people I tried to explain to, like a little over a week ago at the Royal Society, when I was talking to these top people, and I just explained, why don't we just put the metadata in the back of the document? Every time I talked to someone, their expression was like, that's a good idea. But that's where it stops. And I'm not saying that's the only thing we should do, but there are so many different ways. We really need to look at what text is. Leon.
Yeah, I would like to respond to that. I think the moment an idea like we becomes painful, then I think it's time to change the definition of we, because we, it's a very multi-layered word. And I think when we're talking about we having the opportunity of, being able to change the future and how text will be interacted with, I think that can be seen on many layers. There is a we of we, the people here in this meeting. There is also a we of, the bigger we, which we are part of, which also involves all kinds of standards, organizations, which have to get inspired, hopefully, by stuff we are doing. And this is a incredible web of we's, actually a cluster of we's, which are all sort of inspiring each other's. So it's to see a one-on-one connection of making progress there is almost impossible. It's sort of like an emerging, all these we's will get sort of similar ideas, and slowly it gets sort of consolidated to and even big companies, like when a let's say Steve Jobs says we are going to do this, it's part of a much larger.
Leon, I'm just going to cut in because Dini has to go in a second.
Sorry.
So I really don't mean to be rude, but if we look at some of the big innovations, like the internet itself, it was some graduate students doing it. Right? I'm not saying we can make a standard. Absolutely not, Leon. I completely agree with you. But there are some things we can do, and that may become standard if we do it. Standards come from usage, right? And I know you agree on that. We've discussed it many times. So I'm saying we can try it. That's all I'm saying. Sorry for cutting you off. I apologize. Dini, please.
Hard to know where to tackle this without ruffling feathers and getting people upset. I think we have in our field names like Engelbart, Jobs, Nelson, these big name people, Berners-Lee, who've done remarkable things. And their names have emerged as important people in our world. And I think that there's folks that in our current life that want to become part of that pantheon. I totally recognize that. And there's people, from Google to Amazon, all jostling for these positions of eternal legacy and brilliance. I totally get that. But I also think that none of those people would have been successful without someone else. Jobs had Wozniak and a whole team of people. Berners-Lee was not working alone. I mean, everybody works together as a team. So as Leon was saying, Leon, I totally agree with you because I want to define what we is. There's a large we, there's we here. It's not our job to solve every problem in the universe.
I'm not trying to solve every problem. Dini, sorry.
What I was going to say is it's not our job to solve these specific problems. We can put things out there and help people.
It absolutely is our job to solve these problems, I think. And then to have someone disagree with us, and then we try another way. But I really do think that we have to say, it is this, let's discuss. Rather than...
As an academic, my job is to put ideas out to the forefront. If someone agrees with me about media translation, great. If they don't, then let them speak their mind about what they think it is. And we have a large conversation in the field about, that's what peer review is all about. That's what going to conferences and getting feedback is about. So it's a collaboration of a lot of great minds working together. I don't think this group would be successful without every one of you in the room. I mean, Mark, I rely on you heavily for specific things. I need to hear from Brandel. about, you know, the corporate world and what's happening in innovation in this world.
But how
All
does
of us bring something special, but it's not up to any one of us to be the next Steve Jobs.
No, but Danny, I'm not in any way suggesting anyone should be any specific pantheon person, Jobs, Engelbart, or otherwise. What I'm saying is, as a community of practice, which is what you were talking about, I don't think we practice a whole deal.
Oh, I think we
we
are. I think we're making good progress. I need to go, but can I hear from Brandel? And then I need to get to my meeting.
Yeah, I was going to say that my actual job, the one that I get paid the money for, is to look at what to do to augment the web itself. I hopefully it doesn't appear to be a bait and switch to everybody in the room here, but I actually don't like WebXR. I don't think it's a good idea for the majority of the web to be sort of constructed in it. I think it's a wonderful prototyping platform that we should be using to feel out the stuff here. But ultimately, the web needs to be made out of HTML. Yeah, HTML will be the HTML of 3D, is what I say. People say, "Oh my God, USD or GLTF will be the HTML of 3D," and I'm like, HTML is going to be the HTML of VR. And so, you know, I work on things like model element, and I work on you know, making sure that if in a world where we move into having spatialized CSS and other things like that, that it does the jobs that we need it to do. And so I'm doing double duty in this community here of sort of talking about in broad strokes what the benefits of virtual reality are, but also taking what we're saying in a context like this into World Wide Web Consortium and the engineering sort of disciplines up and down the stack within what constitutes Vision OS and Safari and all of those different things, in order to make sure that the flavor of the problem, I mean, it's pretty oblique, but the state of those things is something that people are aware would need to be on the horizon for not Vision OS 1, Vision OS 2, but maybe Vision OS 10. You know, when do we get to these milestones, and what kind of deep infrastructural architectural work needs to be done in order to make sure that these problems are considered? Because unfortunately, there are very few people literally anywhere in the world who are well enough versed in what it is that a high performance real time graphical system such as Quest OS or Vision OS or whatever, and also literate, like in the sense of having a respect for what literature is, what writing is, what reading is, those things. And so, you know, I wedged myself in there in order to be able to do that, and then I borrowed this community in order to make sure that I have enough of a basis to be able to reason about that. That's not going to make me Steve Jobs or Wozniak or anything, but I think it will hopefully furnish us with a number of web standards that will be able to be the successor to this excellent work that is in no way invalidated by the fact that I don't see the long-term future of WebXR, but more that it's a basis on which to reason about what these future standards should be. So, yeah.
I'm going to respond to that quickly. The lab has a perspective that we can't save everything forever. If we can just get it in a form that will take it to the next step so that the next generation can pick it up and move it forward. So it's about moving the ball forward down the field, right? To use the football metaphor. And so if we take that incremental step, then we're making careful, thoughtful, mindful decisions that other people can understand and pick up and move with. As we're part of a system, it's a systemic way of thinking about knowledge making. It's different than, you know, I'm going to invent something today. And so I take more of that kind of perspective in my lab. You know, it's not just one person in that lab. There's a lot of people that are really smart in there, Andrew being one of them. And so we're all there to kind of make knowledge so that somebody later can do something with it. So I need to get to the lab meeting now. Hey guys, thank you all, and I'll see you on Wednesday. Smooches, happy face, love.
Bye-bye.
There
Bye.
we go.
Rhoda, I'll send. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for the. I'll have taken a picture of the picnic basket. I'll throw it into the Slack channel so you could see the lovely gift that Froda sent me with the big blue bow from Fortnum & Mason. So thank you. Smooches.
Bye-bye. I have to drop two now.
Yeah, I have to go in a minute, but I'm glad you guys are here for another few seconds. Um, I have to be careful because, as you all know, I did have a stroke 2 years ago. And yesterday I was so dizzy, it took 12 hours for it to go, and today it isn't gone. No matter, Dini is great, and all of this I'm very happy to say to her face, but she obviously comes at it from an academic point of view. I come at it from a half academic, half developer point of view. And the development I realized when I started my PhD is not doing the app, it's doing the data that can make the app. So it scares the living daylights out of me how dumb these things are, in the sense of not being smart, in the sense that Mark having to go through the ACM database to make a viewable thing. It really frightens me. And I do think we have an opportunity to, in a good way, all of us fight from our perspective in a very productive way to do something like, let's just say LaTeX. Let's say that's what we use. LaTeX in HTML or whatever the heck it is, a thing, and make it authorable, something that different author systems can. If it's just, we can't keep making this and someone else's problem, right? And as I was saying earlier, when I talk to these people, I mean, this includes the head of the ACM, right? The president. When he finally gets it. So many people. Okay, so when I worked with Doug many years ago, extremely grateful to do so, I kind of got where he came from because I'm not very intelligent. So many intelligent people, they see so much more. What I see is very simple. And I don't think Doug was in that sense intelligent. I think he was above intelligent because he simplified. What he explained literally was at surface value. There wasn't all kinds of complexities that people kept looking for. And I think we're at a point now that we don't need to think about a Pantheon or Steve Jobs or whatever. There are some obvious things that need to happen. Text needs to contain more stuff. We all agree with that. It needs to be more transportable. We all agree with that. It needs to be viewable in these ways. We agree on that. And in order to do that, we have to do that. And that does actually include paper as well. Alan, I'm very glad you're here today, despite lurking so far. I'm sure you have many opinions on this, but I also have to be careful about my own physical health, not mental health, because having been at the Royal Society and talked to these people who are in such eminent positions to do stuff, for them to just not be their job, if they said, oh, what you're doing is really stupid, we're doing something else, fantastic. We all have other things we could play with. But to me, this is the very, very fundamental what it is to be in a digital world. Anyway, I could do another 2 hours on this, but I think you know what I mean. Well, no, I see what you're saying here, Mark, but I really, truly, honestly think that we just need to. The only time, to take Doug as an example, the only time Doug made progress, the only time was when he did a demo. He would travel around North America with a film projector, show his proposed system, run it through, and then run it back, stop a couple of frames and show what's happening. I'm really grateful for the symposium and the book, that we are producing a new book, and we've done, and look, this is with love for all of you guys, we've done zero effort in how the book should be readable in XR, other than if we do something manual. That's crazy, right? And we argued in good ways over, especially you and me, Mark, because we're passionate about it, about different aspect of metadata and AI and keywords and all of that stuff. That's really, really important. That can produce something.
I just circle back the comment I made, because the thing I was trying to put across, and as I'm seeing in reflection now after sort of getting several years into this, is that I think the hard part, and I think back to something, my first career, totally unseen because it was in the service and you wouldn't have seen, but I actually changed one of the 3 major tactical procedures on which life and death depended because it was out of date, but nobody wanted to deal with it because it was too difficult. But I reflect that much of what I'm doing now is what I did then, and the nuance is not accepting other people's sort of standards in terms of practice as being standards if they are not so, but also leaving space to listen. So but then trying not to do exactly what they're doing. So it's trying to shake all the loose stuff off, and I think we're actually doing that. I mean, I know it's not as fast as we'd like, but I've certainly found it very interesting. Mindful for seeing my head above the parapet for hypertext, but actually the experience of having to wrangle the proceedings. I mean, what I learned is that most people don't complain or they don't ask. So a lot of really substandard practice happens because everyone thinks everyone's happy, and in fact they aren't. And you ask them, they're actually very unhappy. And it's been really enlightening actually working with some, especially with first-time authors, just helping them through and understanding. I mean, I have a sense of it. It's really good to have the evidence to say, yeah, no one's explained to you what you have to do. So part of the issue isn't just the standards. It's actually the surrounding scaffolding, explaining people why they do it, because most of the things at first sight that we're going to ask people to do seem like extra work, if only because they're new. We're having to learn something new we didn't know before. And who wants to waste the little time they have on this planet doing stuff the value of which is not immediately apparent? So I think actually we've made a lot more progress than perhaps we give ourselves credit for.
Yeah, that's fair enough, but it's been interesting to see that the term metadata. First of all, there is no official definition of it, and it's interesting. The history is kind of loose, and the way it's been used in the community. And recently I've had to just drop the term because it doesn't have real meaning. But there is stuff behind the text on the screen, no matter how we see it. And I really just think we need to just start experimenting. The one thing I have in my world is I use basic BibTeX. That's how I go between reader and author, and it bloody well works. It's amazing. It's an imperfect standard, absolutely, but it's a standard and it works. Why can't we do BibTeX or CSS or whatever the heck for XR? We can, clearly. But I think we need to start experimenting. Now, Dini is, of course, concerned about overloading Andrew, but we do have other opportunities to try things. By the way, since what you typed in here, Alan, I'm also going to ask Brandel to do a WebXR page or wrapper or whatever to view stereo video. Is that a big job? It's not, is it?
No. All you need to do is decide whether it's left, right, or top, bottom. You're going to be performance and resolution constrained to the extent that the processing of that stuff will be able to work. But it's pretty achievable. You just need to use a video texture and hook it up. It's 10 minutes of work with the right knowledge.
Thank you. The reason I ask, I'm saying my brother, with the producer tomorrow, they want to do cultural things like a bit of a play or a poem in a specific place in London, and then these are people connected to the City of London, so they can do it. It also seems to me to be very relevant to what we're doing. Imagine just having, stereo video behind our book if it's relevant, right? Yeah.
I have another meeting as well. I need to drop for that. But yeah, this has been really interesting. I wasn't aware how worried you were, Frode. I would love to be able to sort of help with those fears. But I like I said, I see this on a time frame and a scale that means that it's hard to anticipate being able to do much with it without taking in that longer view, and that provides me peace. But yeah, I hope we find it for you too.
Well, Brandel, the fact that you're here is one of the mitigating factors against stress, because you represent reality and wisdom. I would like to try to do some things. I've stopped development of Author for Vision because it's just pointless at this point within my constrained budget and the developing opportunities. What Andrew's doing is much more interesting, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't experiment. Anyway, you have a meeting, and thank you. And but Brandel, we do something that's useful, people might use it. It won't happen automatically by time. Time itself does nothing.
Indeed. All right. See y'all.
See you.
So Alan is here today. Mark, did you notice? He might be
No, I
trying
did.
to.
I was sort of going to say a sort of a hello and goodbye, because I'm going to have to drop pretty soon as well, because I've got some things. But anyway, it's very good to see you. And I hope all this going well, or better.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I just didn't have anything to contribute, but it's good to see everyone.
Yeah, it's the thing. I'm very grateful that we have Andrew and the Andrew money to build something, because it really helps the discussions at some point settle down and test. And on Mondays it should be more discussions anyway. But
Yeah, I did check out some of the demos with the Oculus, and it's pretty impressive. So I'm sure the hand tracking is better on the newer devices, but it definitely I was able to grasp it in a way that I was not able to exactly before, just by seeing pictures. So very cool.
yeah, thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, I mean the hands don't do anything yet, but you can. No, sorry. When the hand menu, of course, the pointing does, and the pointing is pretty good. He's worked really hard on that.
Excellent.
But yeah, no, that they're not there. But I mean, Alan, what I would like to see you more is in these discussions, and we're trying to do themes and so on. What we talked about before, the whole digital analog connection, all these things are really, really important. And
Yeah, I'm still working on stuff. It's just not exactly on the VR side of things, but
oh, it doesn't have to be VR side. The reason I'm excited about VR is 90% the fact that it's new, and that's it. It just helps
yeah,
people try something new. It's most of this can be used on a nice monitor. I did
yeah,
have a revelation last week, though, which I shared with the group, which was in the Vision Pro. There's an app called oh, Mark, what's it called? It's the scanning app. It doesn't matter. A Polymap or something. Anyway, when you open up a model, a 3D model, there's a loading thing that's a sphere composed of tiny, tiny dots. And those dots were so crisp and clear and clearly three-dimensional. It just made me, oh my God, if we have 1 million documents on the screen, how would we, Polycam, thank you, that's exactly it, Polycam for, it was one of those moments that, yes, we're really wasting an opportunity so far, so we need to work on
very
that.
good. Well, have a great week.
Yeah, talk to you later,
Yep.
guys.
Okay, mustache. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.